In 1998, Microsoft made the risky decision of entering the gaming console market. Why did they do this? Well, at the time, there was good reason to believe that Sony and their console juggernaut, the PlayStation, was a threat to the personal computer, a market Microsoft had relied heavily on. And so, a small team forms within Microsoft consisting of Kevin Backus, Seamus Blackley, Ted Hayes, and Otto Burks. A short while later, they are joined by their appointed team leader, Ed Fries. With the team now formed, Backus, Blackley, Hayes, and Burks were tasked with creating a machine to rival Sony's console. And as for Fries, well, he had the job of travelling the globe and acquiring developers to create games for a console that hadn't even left the drawing board. Fries was able to secure 3 acquisitions before the launch of the Xbox. Ensemble Studios, the developers of the hit strategy game Age of Empires; Rare, the legendary company that had been developers for many Nintendo titles, including Donkey Kong Country and Perfect Dark; and last but certainly not least, Bungie. They were behind a certain game, you may have heard of it, Halo. But I'm getting ahead of myself. So let us fast forward to the year 2000, and Sony had just released the PlayStation 2. Microsoft's fears are revalidated. The PS2 had impressive 3D graphics, a solid lineup of games, and it could play DVDs to boot. A year after its initial launch in Japan, and the PS2 had already shipped over 10 million units. Whatever Microsoft was planning to do with their mystery console, they had to do it soon, because the competition was slipping away.
This is the product that will be out later this year, and there's an amazing amount going on. Working with partners who help build the hardware, working with the software developers, working with the retailers. The program around this thing is really quite phenomenal. But the box itself is another thing that we put a lot of energy into. So you may have been wondering what this draped device was here. This is the Xbox. And so, for the first time, let me now unveil Xbox.
The year is 2001. The PS2 is a runaway train, and Bill Gates, then CEO of Microsoft, goes on stage to reveal the Xbox. With the help of The Rock, of course. Gates touts the Xbox as the ultimate gaming machine, promising to deliver the most powerful gaming experience money could buy at the time. And in many aspects, the original Xbox was ahead of its time, and I'm not just talking about the graphics, but also the option to utilize HD TV cables, during a time when most people were still using big old standard definition CRTs. But there was something else. On the back of the Xbox, we saw something quite peculiar, quite foreign for a gaming console at the time, and something that would prove to be a pivotal point in the gaming world: an Ethernet port. On the 15th of November 2001, the Xbox launches in North America. The following year, on the 22nd of February, it launches in Japan. The next month, on the 14th of March, it launches in Europe and Australia. For the breathtakingly competitive market Microsoft had just entered, the Xbox did enough to not just be considered a flash in the pan. It helped a great deal that the oversized black box was launched with some excellent games, including Dead or Alive 3, Jet Set Radio Future, and of course, Halo, Combat Evolved. Titles that are still talked about to this day. And while the PS2 continued to enjoy majority market control, Microsoft still had one more ace up their sleeve. Remember that Ethernet port? Well, it wasn't just window dressing, and exactly a year after the Xbox's initial launch, Microsoft launches Xbox Live on the 15th of November, 2002. An online subscription-based platform where Xbox users can connect through the internet and play with or against other Xbox users. The gaming world hadn't seen anything like this before. If the personal computer had pioneered online gaming, then Xbox Live had taken it to the next step. A platform where all of its users shared the same online space had never been successfully implemented before. A friends list where you can add players whose company you enjoyed, where you can see what they were up to. If you wanted them to join you in a match, you could just send them an invite to your game. Its ease of use and functionality made it an extremely alluring platform at the time. Racing across rugged terrain, duking it out in massive battle mechs, or just having an old-fashioned deathmatch session. All against complete strangers. And in the year 2002, we had seen nothing like it before. Xbox Live wasn't just about connecting strangers from around the world, however. There was something else to it as well.
Hey, did you know that your Xbox has a Mondo hard drive? This means that game updates can be sent to you right over the network and stored on your hard drive. Say like current roster changes in your favorite sports games, new vehicles, maps, weapons, racetracks, skins, a ton of stuff. It's huge. I just go to the list of downloadable content, choose what I want, and pop it up onto my Xbox. Good to go. Downloaded content keeps every game fresh.
Allowing users the ability to enhance games they already own through downloadable content was something that had never been done on a global scale, and to the general public. Even on PC, developers usually opted to release hard copy versions of extra content for their games in the form of expansion packs, which you could either receive via mail order, or you would have to head down to your local video game store to pick up. Back then, most companies didn't have the digital and hardware infrastructure to host content from various games, ready for anyone to download at any time. But a tech giant like Microsoft did. And because of that, they were leading the charge for online console gaming. Countless games took advantage of the Xbox Live platform. You had games like MechAssault releasing new mechs and levels to play on, Ghost Recon 2 releasing dozens of weapons, maps and game types. Rainbow Six 3 had several new multiplayer maps. Rally Sport Challenge 2 gave you new vehicles. Return to Castle Wolfenstein gave you 3 new multiplayer maps. Splinter Cell dropped 3 brand new single-player missions, 10 new characters and 4 new maps for Unreal Championship 2. Dozens of new tracks and cars to race in Project Gotham Racing 2. A new character class for Jade Empire. 4 new planes to fly in Crimson Skies. Office and Inferno ported to Counter-Strike for Xbox. And who could forget? Tombstone and Desolation. 2 new maps for Halo 2, only available through Xbox Live. And I've only scratched the surface. 10 new spells for Magic the Gathering Battlegrounds. Over 100 new songs for Karaoke Revolution Links Party. 2004 adds 3 new golf courses. Trashburg City is added to Godzilla 2 new Destroy All Monsters. New songs for Dance Revolution. Microsoft's Xbox may not have been selling like hotcakes when put aside the PlayStation 2, but they were enjoying the benefits of a consistent online gaming community. Customers can subscribe to their platform and interact with friends and strangers from across the globe. Developers are able to support their games post-launch and keep gamers interested in their titles. Xbox Live laid down the groundwork for how we know the online gaming landscape as it is today, and they started it all over 20 years ago. Live gave developers like Day One Studios room to improve and challenge themselves to create more robust multiplayer experiences. The first MechAssault had your standard multiplayer affair with deathmatch, team battles and so on, but when it came time to make a sequel, they decided the stock standard wasn't going to cut it this time around.
We've got 7 different game types. We've got some of the favorites like Capture the Flag, Destruction, Team Destruction, which are always played, very, very frequently, probably the most played games. There's 7 different primary game types, and you can mix in a variety of different maps.
Conquest Mode is this new feature that we've added to the game, which really sort of takes multiplayer to the next level. The ability for people to engage in multiplayer combat. What they do in multiplayer actually persists.
Red team steals a core.
And what other people do in multiplayer persists. People fight for territory and who's got this planet one night. It might change the next night.
They created Conquest, a persistent online experience where players take part and fight for territory across a galactic map, spanning multiple worlds. One day you could battle to your last mech and win a fight by the skin of your teeth, only to come back the next day and realize your opponent had retaken the planet. For avid gamers today, this sounds familiar, but this was done back in 2004, on console. Gone were the days where developers would just slap on multiplayer as an afterthought and call it a day. A new bar had been set, and it was high.
Of course, we can't talk about Xbox Live without mentioning Halo 2. Many of you may not be aware, but Halo 2 is where matchmaking was born.
We tried something completely new, which is this party system, where you and your friends kind of combine together online, and you can jump from game to game to game to game, and you and your friends will always be together.
You suck, man. Watch your back, watch your back, watch your back.
It was really amazing to get online for the first time when there were a bunch of people online and just press the button that said, I want to play, go find me some other people that want to play and choose a game type that's pretty cool and just stick me in it as fast as you can, and to have that process happen in like 5 seconds was really incredible.
My clan is a group of guys that form a team, and we may practice, we may join one of these matchmaking playlists.
It's hard to play with people that are lower skill level than you, even if you really like them, because you're probably going to lose more often, and you're not going to have as much fun.
Halo 2's method of having online players get into a game was to have you, the player, select what game mode you wanted to play, whether that be free-for-all, team slayer, team objective, whatever. And once you had your game mode of choice selected, it would find you other players to play with who also had selected that game mode and were currently searching for a game. Sounds familiar? That's because every top multiplayer game being played today uses the matchmaking system in some way, shape or form. Counter-Strike Global Offensive, Overwatch, Call of Duty, Fortnite, Rocket League, Apex Legends. These are games millions of people are playing each day. Before matchmaking, you would either have to have a friend tell you the specific IP address of a server and you would need to connect manually, or you would need to sift through a server browser to find a game of your liking, taking note of what game mode it was running and what maps it had in rotation. Matchmaking before Halo 2 was almost unheard of.
The impact Halo 2 and Xbox Live had with things like friends lists, clans lists, voice messaging, in-depth stats and leaderboards, avatar and emblem customization, those are things we take for granted today, but someone had to create those systems. And we're talking back in 2003, 2004. The amount of pressure and number crunching involved would have been immense. And in fact, it was.
We messed up. Like, we didn't have the design down, we didn't have the story down.
Once we actually started to see how long the missions were taken to produce and how long they were taken to design and script, and it just wasn't going to work.
And then everything that wasn't essential, all these things that we just loved to see in the game, they get put on the bottom of this list, and we start hacking them off.
Here comes the knife. Out of the script, what's important, that isn't, goodbye, my lovely child.
The Bungie process of making cool games has worked up until now, but is it possible that there's an amount of pressure or an ambition that's beyond what we can actually do? I don't know. We haven't finished it yet.
The Xbox was created by one of the largest corporations to ever exist, so it is easy to disassociate it from the human element vital to its development. Individuals at places like Bungie, Day One Studios, and even Microsoft, who took massive strides and made many risks to pioneer one of the most pivotal experiences the gaming industry had ever seen to that date. Fast forward to 2006, and Xbox Live proved to be enough of a success that Microsoft doubled down with the Xbox Live 2.0 for their new console, the Xbox 360. 2.0 was a separate network to 1.0. It had to be, to allow for broader possibilities with the live service. At least that's what Microsoft states. And from what we saw with the updated service, it appeared to be true. A larger friends list limit, ability to invite multiple friends to chat in the new party system, and our famous achievement system where you can compare your gamer score with others on your friends list. A reputation rating that appeared on everyone's profile, so you know who to play with and who to avoid. Xbox Live 2.0, without a doubt, felt more robust than its predecessor. Even with all the new bells and whistles, people would still log into the original Xbox Live to run a few laps with their buddies in MotoGP, or play a few rounds in Halo 2. In fact, speaking of Halo 2, it was still Microsoft's most played online game, even after the launch of the Xbox 360. It was only 2 years after its release, when Gears of War finally dropped, that Halo 2 was finally taken off the #1 spot. So, original Xbox titles ran on Xbox Live 1.0, and Xbox 360 titles ran on Xbox Live 2.0. These two networks ran parallel to each other, but they were, unequivocally, two different networks, and they both needed to be maintained separately. And they were. For a while. On the 5th of February 2010, the announcement was made. The original Xbox Live network will be shut down, forever. In a letter penned by Mark Whitten, the general manager of Xbox Live at the time, he opened it by stating this: "On April 15th, we will discontinue the Xbox Live service for original Xbox consoles." So there you have it. The date was set. On the 15th of April 2010, At exactly midnight, the servers for the original Xbox Live will be taken down, permanently. So what did that mean exactly? That meant every original Xbox game that supported online multiplayer, that online component would no longer be functional. No more running laps with your buddies on MotoGP, no more Team Slayer on Ascension, and most certainly no more Conquest mode on MechAssault 2. All those intricately designed online multiplayer experiences were to be shut down, unavailable for play ever again. And what about all that downloadable content being hosted on the original Xbox Live? Surely that was going to be backed up somewhere, maybe copied over to another server? No, that was going offline too. Those map packs for Ghost Recon 2, gone. That new hill climb on Rally Sport Challenge 2, that was gone as well. Even Desolation and Tombstone, maps released exclusively on Xbox Live for Microsoft's biggest IP, Halo 2, would no longer be available for download. If you didn't have them backed up on your Xbox at the time, you would never see them again. It is the 14th of April, 2010, and thousands of people are logging into the original Xbox Live service to savor an experience they will never get to go through again after the clock strikes midnight. You have mechs blasting each other on MechAssault. You got a few Splinter Cell fanatics playing Chaos Theory's amazing multiplayer, and you have a fleet of crazy drivers wrecking it up in Burnout 3 Takedown. But of course, the majority of people who logged in that day were there to play one game and one game only, Halo 2, and they were going to get in as many matches as possible before Microsoft pulls the plug on its online multiplayer forever. As thousands of people played their beloved online classics one last time, they all braced for the inevitable. The clock ticked over to midnight, 15th of April, and nothing. No, I actually mean nothing happened. People were still in their matches and they were still continuing to play. So what gives? Why hadn't Microsoft pulled the plug like they claimed they were going to do? Well, that's the thing. Microsoft's rollout of the shutdown was going to work differently than initially expected. You see, if you were still logged into Xbox Live on the 15th of April midnight, you will still be able to play online. But once you logged out, you would not be let back in. And the fans, well, they saw that as a challenge. So, the ground rules were set. Stay logged in for as long as possible and keep the original Xbox Live running. Many games were being played online by the official cutoff date. Games like Battlefront 2 and MechAssault Lone Wolf. But as the hours went on into the early morning, more and more players started logging out. Many players had work the next day or other responsibilities, so those games eventually went dark. One game that refused to go dark, however, was Halo 2. 24 hours after the shutdown date, and it was estimated there were still 500 players on Xbox Live playing Halo 2. Players refused to sign out. They didn't want to lose this piece of gaming history. Many of them spent countless nights of their childhood playing Halo 2 online, and many of them made lifelong friends because of it. People would go to work and leave their Xboxes switched on, determined to keep the lights on and running, on a network service that was condemned to be lost forever. Unfortunately, however, as the days went on, more and more people were getting logged out due to circumstances out of their control. Either their internet would cut out, there would be a power outage, or in some cases, their Xboxes would just overheat and die. So what started out as 500 eventually dwindled down to 400, then 300, 200, 100. And then that number stopped at 14. Why 14? Well, the time between disconnects of the 15th and 14th Xbox Live user were considerably longer than any disconnect before that. It was by this point Microsoft released a statement on the 14 individuals who refused to let the original Xbox Live die. A small band of a committed few engaged in a battle against insurmountable odds. It's not Noble Team from Halo Reach. It's the final, passionate few who are still playing Halo 2. We wish them the best in their battle against time. Microsoft wasn't shaking their fist and yelling at these people to get off their network, but instead they were celebrating them. They likened them to Noble Team, a group of Spartans who fought against the inevitable, in what was at the time the upcoming game Halo Reach. Thus the Halo developers and fans alike dubbed them the Noble 14. From the 28th of April 13 days after the initial shutdown date, the Noble 14 began reducing in numbers, some due to connection problems, other due to power outages, and a few of them left to play the Halo Reach beta. And by the 10th of May, 25 days after the declared shutdown date, there were only 2 players left, Agent Windex and Apache Enforcer. At 4:15 AM on the 10th of May, Agent Windex was booted off the network. On a network that once hosted over 2 million people, Apache Enforcer was now the only user online. And at 1:58 in the morning, 11th of May 2010, Apache Enforcer was logged out of the network. The original Xbox Live was no more. Back in 2020, close to the 10-year anniversary of the shutdown, YouTube channel Gaming by Gamers interviewed Apache Enforcer to get his point of view. He said this: "To be told that you'll never be able to play this game again, I didn't like that because that game was a reminder of what kept me going. I created a lot of friendships from it." I personally think Apache's sentiment is right on the money. When your favorite bar gets knocked down, you don't get upset about the bricks and cement used to build the place. You lament its loss because of all the experiences you had there. The first Xbox Live was a business venture by Microsoft to rival its competitors. But I don't think that should overshadow the experiences had by people like Apache Enforcer, who made lifelong friendships with people he would have never known otherwise. And you can't disregard developers at places like Bungie and Day One Studios, who pushed the boundaries of what was possible in the online space back in 2004. And one must give special credit to the individuals who took a massive gamble jumping on board the Xbox team to create a console that had no guarantee whatsoever of being a success. In fact, in an interview with IGN, Ed Freeze, the team lead for Xbox, was told by several of his colleagues that if he were to join the Xbox team, he would be destroying his career.
So anyway, I ended up going interviewing for that job, and then what happened was everybody a bunch of vice presidents freaked out and they told me I was committing career suicide. They said, "Why would you leave office, one of the most important parts of the company, to go work on something no one cares about?" That's a direct quote.
Wow.
So that's why I didn't want you to skip
Famous
that
last
part,
words.
because it's important. But I ignored them all. They let me do what I wanted.
Yeah.
Eventually.
When the original Xbox Live went down, we didn't just lose access to those experiences. We lost a breathtaking amount of media. Those pieces of content you would download for games, new levels, new cars, new missions, they were gone, and we can't get them back. Lost media is not a new problem. In fact, Xbox Live's shutdown is just a more recent example. It is estimated that 90% of films made before 1929 have been lost forever. Works of art created by people from a bygone era that we can never experience again. Is that going to be the same fate for all the content that existed purely on Xbox Live? A few years back, I ran into an individual on a mutual server who goes by the alias Harcroft. We both shared a great interest in the original Xbox Live. During one of our many conversations, he told me something quite interesting, integral to the preservation of the original network. Since late 2005, Harcroft has been archiving all pieces of media that had existed on the first Xbox Live. Basically, he was an Xbox hobbyist. He would download various pieces of content, pull them apart in a hex editor, and see what made them tick. Back in 2005, there wasn't really any interest in preserving any of the content. We just thought it would be around forever. It wasn't really until 2008 Harcroft realized it may be worth archiving all of his content. He was no longer just backing up this content for the fun of it. There was now an urgency to preserve this content, just in case we ever lost it. I recently interviewed Harcroft to get his side of the story, why he started archiving content on the original Xbox Live.
Something to do, man. It was something fun to play with. I was trying to get the DLC to work for me originally, and I realized it was kind of later on that after doing all this, like, that was much bigger than just for me. That, you know, a lot of people can't access this DLC. I mean, it used to be just for the fun of it, being able to, like, the challenge and the project of doing it, but now it's definitely the community.
Harcroft spent over $500 of his own money towards backing up downloadable content off the original Xbox Live. And he wasn't alone. Xbox hobbyist and friend of Harcroft, who goes under the online handle Amy Girl, was backing up titles even before Harcroft was, also spending hundreds of her own dollars to have Xbox Live's hosted content preserved.
We started trying to really push people on various forums and places to help out, see if they could contribute, because I had very little money at the time and I should not have been spending money on DLC. A lot of people gave us their DLC, and very few people did give me money to spend on DLC. Like a guy sent me almost all of Xbox Live Arcade, or I think Amy paid for all of Xbox Music Mixer. Lock, stock and barrel, she paid for Music Mixer for all the DLC for that.
Amy and Harcroft were quite vocal in the years leading up to the shutdown. They were trying to get more and more people to purchase and back up content on the original Xbox. However, with games like Modern Warfare 2 and Halo Reach releasing, it is easy to see where the public interest was at the time. Not many people were interested in a dusty old console from 2001. The shiny new Xbox 360 could do everything better.
I do wish we could have got more of it. I wish more, I found a lot of people didn't really seem to care about the DLC back then too, as much as we did. And because we were asking for help with, about other people could help us obtain that DLC, and it was just barely any response from people.
It was a pretty calm response, for a couple, I want to say for 2 years, and it was 2010, people started going, oh my god, DLC is going to be gone. And it's like we were Chicken Little yelling, the sky is falling for literally over 2 years. And then suddenly people were like, oh my god, the sky is falling, oh, Harcroft did this, Amy Girl did that, and it's like, yeah guys, could you help us 2 years ago? And people actually today message me going, hey, how can I contribute? I'm like, find some DLC that hasn't been released yet. They're like, oh, I don't know how to do that. Can I send you money? I'm like, I don't want your money. It's not going to help the project any, unless you can find an old console that's been on live and it's still working, money's not going to help today. So I always say no to that, obviously. But people ask today, how do we help? And it's like, well, we needed your help 11 years ago,
Harcroft was also quick to give credit to members of the Xbox community who made significant contributions to make sure rarer titles had their content preserved. A Japanese exchange student who was living in the United States in 2012, going by the alias Shoetime, had contacted Harcroft about DLC he had for Metal Wolf Chaos, one of the rarest games on the original Xbox, only getting a release in Japan.
He mailed me from the US to Canada a Japanese smoke, a skeleton Xbox, because it had the Metal Wolf Chaos DLC on it. Someone took the time and the money and the effort to basically throw away something like that to help the community. And that's the kind of person I want to give credit to.
Because of Shoetime's contribution, Harcroft was able to successfully preserve one of the more obscure pieces of Xbox's history. During our interview, Harcroft and Amy brought something to my attention that I had no idea about. Just over a month before the live shutdown, Microsoft actually took down all of the online content on the original network. Many fans took to several forums to express much of their frustration with this move, and it was only after this backlash from the community that they were brought back online for Live's final month of service. From many of these forum posts at the time, it was clear that Xbox users were making preparations for the shutdown. Many customers were making last-minute purchases on a service that was soon to disappear. Users on forums like pennyarcade.com had desperately started to catalogue what games had additional online content. You could no longer say to yourself, "Oh, I'll buy it one day. What's the rush?" Users were getting their finances together and going on spending sprees, because this was the last time they could ever make a purchase on the original Xbox Live. I asked Amy what is the most sought-after piece of content that has yet to be properly preserved. What you are seeing play on screen is the Quest Central Dome Fire Swirl from the game Phantasy Star Online Episode 1 and 2. The Quest was released as downloadable content, and while Harcroft does have a copy of the Quest backed up, given the nature of online MMO content, he has not yet been able to get it in an operational state. The version you are seeing play was released for the Sega Dreamcast.
The efforts being made by people like Amy Girl and Harcroft are for preservation purposes only. I cannot offer you any resources into acquiring any of this content, as it still falls under a legal grey area. And while most of the content has effectively been abandoned, some of it is still tied to intellectual property.
I can, however, point you in one direction to acquire some of the content. Xbox demo discs. In the early 2000s, the internet was still considered a frivolous commodity in many households. And for Xbox users such as myself, demo discs were a way to keep up with the latest in gaming. Try the latest games, check out cool gameplay and secrets recorded by fans, and last but not least, get our hands on some post-release content for some of our favourite games. In fact, it was thanks to some of these demo discs we have been able to preserve post-release content for several games like Splinter Cell and Rainbow Six 3. Out of curiosity, I asked the two hobbyists exactly how much of all the content on the original Xbox Live has been archived, and to my surprise, the number was a lot bigger than I expected. Harcroft and Amy believe approximately 95% of all content that existed on the original Xbox Live has been preserved and archived.
I can't overstate how important it is to preserve media for future generations to enjoy. And while a few levels of Splinter Cell seem like an awfully specific thing to preserve, I mean, at least it's there, if you ever do wish to experience it.
If you have content on your original Xbox that you believe may not be archived, you can get in touch with the original Xbox community over on Reddit and let them know about your find. They can give you information on how to create backups of your downloaded content. So the dedicated fanbase of the original Xbox had managed to cover the majority of content from Xbox Live. But what about Live's most basic function? The act of playing with or against others online. How can we make that possible again? Fans can't waltz into Microsoft's headquarters and tell them to get the servers back online. So what can they do? On the 29th of April, 2020, a post on the original Xbox Reddit went public announcing Insignia, a project to replace the defunct Xbox Live with a functional network, one that people can connect to and relive the glory days. The project is currently being headed by Luke Usher and has been in development for just over 2 years at the time of recording. Updates on the project have been on a regular trickle. Almost a month after the initial announcement, the Insignia YouTube channel released a video demonstrating the very first thing any user of Insignia would experience: setting up an account. It may not look like much, but this was a massive step in proving that the Insignia project had massive potential. If you have experience in network programming, you would understand what a big step this was. But for people without that kind of knowledge, they wanted more assurance, and they got it. On the 23rd of June that same year, we saw 1.5 minutes of gameplay from MechAssault uploaded to YouTube. It is recorded by Insignia developer Mike, who is based in the United States. Mike walks out of his spawn and takes a look around. He turns to where the enemy mech players would spawn. And out steps Luke, connecting all the way from the UK. For the first time in 10 years, the original Xbox Live took its first breath in the form of Insignia. For an entire decade, these battlefields, these racetracks, these arenas had been abandoned, thought to never host players from around the world ever again. That preconception was no longer the case. This project is being done to bring back something that many people believe should not have went away. I recently got in touch with Billy, who was one of the Insignia developers, just to talk about what it's like to undertake such a massive task. During our chat, he talked about one of the biggest hurdles in bringing back the network was to break through Xbox's secure gateway.
Basically every single bit of traffic that was between the Xbox and the servers, so that logging in, adding a friend, removing a friend, finding a match, starting a match, statistics, anything that was happening between Microsoft and you went through this gateway. And it seemed they did this because it makes the services themselves a lot simpler. They're literally just like web servers. They're just web servers on the services side. But the gateway means that the Xbox has to be authenticated, so it has to have a valid ticket from the server to prove that it's, you know, a paying customer, it's a real Xbox, and so on. But without that gateway, there is really no way for an Xbox that's not modified at least to connect to the services.
Just because the Insignia team are finally able to pass through the secure gateway, some games such as Burnout 3 Takedown and Halo 2 used their own servers. But as Billy explains, we're not exactly sure why they did.
Like for EA games, we'll have to also work on EA servers. I know Halo 2, which obviously is going to be a big topic, Halo 2 has its own server that it uses, but we don't know what for yet, because we're still you know, trying to get all the standard services finished and fully functional, because that would be the way to get the most games working at once. And that's our goal, is to get, you know, as many games as we can working at once, and then look at the games that might be time synced, like Halo 2, like EA games.
Network security and software authentication are cards every company holds close to their chest. Microsoft and Bungie aren't going to let you know how their servers operated, because it might leave them open to potential cyber attacks. Because of this, the team over at Insignia have to play the game of detective, figuring out how these servers operated and why they were put in place.
The Insignia team continues to release updates every now and again, letting people know how the project is coming along. But it is important to know that this is a labour of love. The developers of Insignia have regular lives they have to attend to, day jobs and other responsibilities. If you are interested in the Insignia project and would like to stay up to date with its progress, you could join its official Discord. I have something to confess. The majority of footage you have seen throughout this video wasn't captured from the original Xbox Live. It was recorded thanks to the help from a piece of software called Xlink Kai. You see, the original Xbox came with something called System Link. This feature allows for multiple Xboxes to connect to each other via local area network, LAN for short. And with that, you can have more than 4 players connecting to a single match. Of course, given the nature of LAN games, people would have to lug around their massive Xbox machines to one person's house, so they can all play together on the same network, which admittedly was a great excuse for a social gathering, but sometimes time and distance played a factor in making this kind of thing difficult for some. In steps Xlink Kai. It is with this system link functionality that users are able to essentially trick their Xboxes into thinking they were connecting to a local match, when in reality, players were using the internet to connect directly to other people from all over the world. Xlink Kai originally launched in 2003 and was developed for various consoles in mind. But when Xbox Live shut down in 2010, the service picked up a lot more users, players who weren't quite ready to say goodbye to the black box.
My name is Demon27248 and I'm an administrator for Xlink Kai. I first found out about Xlink, I think 2011 or 2012, so it was post the Xbox Live shutdown. I'm probably like one of the only staff members that came to Xlink because of the shutdown, because I played on Xbox Live prior rather than on LAN tunneling.
So you came looking for Xlink after the Xbox Live shut down, right?
Yeah, basically, because I wanted to play mostly Rainbow Six 3 again, but also like some of my other games.
Demon is part of a group called Xlink Kai Fam, a gaming community that regularly organises game sessions for the original Xbox. An initiative that once started with only 10 members, the group now numbers in the thousands.
I was running Kai Fam around that point, which is like a community for matchmaking for Xbox games, because on Xlink Basically, Halo 2 is the only game that's active, like, just constantly, so you can just hop into the match whenever you want. And the other games you need to kind of plan in advance, so we started the Discord just for that, basically. I actually did move on for a bit to newer games after Xbox Live shut down and all that, but I was just kind of getting bored of a lot of them, so I just went back to original Xbox. When I first came to Xlink, there weren't like nearly as many people just interested in playing like all sorts of different Xbox games, so it's quite cool to see that number just jump up. Like, I think one game night we had like 40 something people on.
In an age where you have modern platforms like Steam and Xbox Game Pass, where it has never been easier to play the most trending titles, hundreds of players are still logging in daily to Xlink to play what they consider timeless classics with like-minded individuals. In addition to chatting to Demon, I managed to get in touch with the current project lead for Xlink Kai.
Hi, I'm Crunchbite. I'm the current team lead of Team Xlink, the creators of Xlink Kai.
I had a quick chat with Crunchbite and he was able to give me more information about Xlink and how he sees the software today.
I first heard about Xlink back when I was in high school, and I had just got my first original Xbox shortly after the 360 was released. A friend of mine sold me his old one, and at the time I was just a high school student, shy as can be, didn't have the guts to go out and get a job, so I had barely any spending money, so I couldn't afford Xbox Live. So I went to look into the alternatives, and I found Xlink Kai and at the time its competitor Xbox Connect. And I ended up on Xlink and been there ever since. That was about 2006, I think. It's been a while. Yeah. In terms of why Xlink is still a thing today, why it's still around, why it's still relevant and important, I think that comes mainly from a preservation perspective of the ability to play online games for older consoles. Xlink's covering everything from original Xbox, which is early 2000, all the way up to the current generation with their backwards compatibility and the occasional game that comes out on the current gen that has LAN. We support that entire range of consoles, the last 20 odd years of consoles that have Ethernet or Wi-Fi, for the most part. There's a few exceptions, but we cover just about everything. So it's really about just preserving that community, I guess, and the ability to take these consoles online for free. Currently, it's the original Xbox with Halo 2 that gets the most traffic. It's incredibly popular in South America. I think it's mainly in Colombia. There's between 80 and 120 users online every day at the peak for Halo 2. As the project lead, I am, a project lead and lead developer as well. I'm overseeing all of the development, a large portion of the social media presence, as small as it is currently, and a lot of the community involvement. Well, I should track that back a little bit. It's mainly Demon that does most of the community involvement, but I'm building tools for it. In terms of how much time I'm spending a week, I'm working on it almost every day for 2 or 3 hours, whether it's fixing aging infrastructure, adding new features, doing bug fixes. I'm all over the place. Like, for example, I spent about 6 hours yesterday revamping our supported games list for Xbox and Xbox 360. Just going through checking, does that actually have LAN? Or is there anything we've missed, that kind of thing? Just cross-referencing all sorts of different sources and just continuing the fact that our supported games list is one of the largest lists of what console games do have LAN. And I think today we're at, let me quickly check here, we're at 963 supported games, which is just mind-blowing. My favorite to play on Xlink would probably be Halo 2, as cliche as that is at this point. But games like Star Wars Battlefront are always great to do. There's just so much fun you can have in there when you get a big lobby going. These days, it's a bit trickier with the Xbox being an older console. Not many people have it, and tunneling itself has always been a niche thing. So usually it's like when there's a scheduled game night for a game I'll jump in as well.
Maintaining Xlink Kai takes time and resources. It is done for the love of the original Xbox and passionate fan base it continues to hold.
When Microsoft shut down the original Xbox Live, I don't think they realized it would spur on a community to preserve everything the console was about. And while the industry continues to move forward with things like ultra-fast SSDs and real-time ray tracing, you could always count on one thing, that there would always be a group of individuals out there who aren't quite ready to say goodbye to this oversized gaming machine.
There is one thing I'm still scratching my head about, something that I never found an answer to. When Microsoft came around to shutting down the Xbox Live servers, why did they allow players to stay logged in? It would have been easy for them to just kick everyone off at midnight and turn the lights off forever. But they didn't. Instead, they let people stay logged in and finish their games. Even 2 weeks after the set shutdown date, they still didn't pull the plug. In fact, not only that, a spokesperson came out to applaud the people who were still logged in. Why? I reached out to Mark Whitten, Xbox Live's general manager during the shutdown period, to try and get some answers on this matter. However, at the time of recording this, he has yet to reply. Xbox never outsold the PlayStation 2. It never even got close. When everything was said and done, the Xbox sold 24 million units, while the PS2 skyrocketed to 155 million units sold, cementing its place as the highest-selling console of all time. And while many analysts will tell you the Xbox was a failed venture, it provided Microsoft with a much-needed jump pad for its successor, the Xbox 360. With a cheaper price point, robust online, and launching a year earlier than the PlayStation 3, Microsoft would finally see themselves having the top spot in the console market. For a while, anyway. With Microsoft getting its taste of success for the first time in the gaming industry, the Xbox quickly faded into the distance. And with new technologies constantly emerging, there wasn't much point to keep the lights on for the 20-year-old console.
Time warps your memory of things. But when I booted up my Xbox for the first time in years, and got involved with communities like Xlink Kai and Insignia, it dawned on me that this console still has a lot to offer. And thanks to a dedicated group of individuals out there, it's never too late to jump on board. My name is Anthony. Thank you for your time.